Hi guys, and welcome to today's episode of the Deep Dive. And this week we have got the great Paul Fowler joining us. We're going to be talking to Paul a bit about what he gets up to as a professional magician, and also his latest project and product, which is Footwear. It's a really commercial effect. We're going to be talking about Paul's original routine with it, plus some bonus routines that I've thrown in the mix, and we're going to explain a bit more about the effect and why it is so strong. But before we meet Paul, if you haven't done so already, please remember to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. You'll be notified every single time we go live with a new YouTube show. So without further ado, let's introduce our guest for today, Mr. Paul Fowler. Hiya, Paul.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome, mate. So, Paul, let's speak a bit about you before we play the trailer. We're going to play the trailer in a moment, Footwear. But you are a professional magician. You have been for how many years?
So, if you include semi-professional, probably like 13, 14 years. But as a full-time professional, we're probably over 10 years now, I would say, easily over 10 years. So, yeah, a fairly long time, I think.
Yeah.
It's strangely gone very quick. So,
it does, mate. The older you get, the quicker it goes, I tell you. It really does. But you still do the weddings and parties and things like that, but you're very big in the corporate scene as well. You've got a lot of corporate clients, so I know you do a lot of trade shows and things like that. How did you get into that sort of corporate market?
So the corporate side of what I do is probably now like 80% of the work that I do, but it took a while to get to that point, and it took a big change in direction, really. So you're correct in what you said, that I do still do weddings and parties. I used to do a lot more of that type of work, but 4 years ago I had kids. I had twin daughters. And I had to start making some decisions over the last couple of years as to sort of wanting to be around more at things like weekends. So I looked into what I was doing and, how I could essentially be around more at weekends and still be a full-time professional magician. And the way to do it was to kind of up the corporate side of what I was doing. And, putting more time and effort and investment into like trade shows, and other corporate styles of events just led me to get to that point. I still will work some, weekends and do weddings, especially nowadays as you get midweek weddings and midweek parties. But 80% of what I do is now corporate.
So, and recently, I would say maybe in the last year, you've actually started to release some of your working material. So, everything you do is very commercial anyway. As a working magician, it always has to be commercial. That's what it boils down to. So you've had a few releases out. I think was your first release Overdraft?
Yes, the first one was Overdraft. I think that was released September last year, so September 2022. And then shortly after that, I had Transaction come out, which is my receipt trick, like a book test style receipt trick. Then very shortly after that as well, I released Resemblance, which was a download of the classic type Phantom effect with Alakazam. And fast forward now, where we are with Footwear.
Yeah, and everything so far, everything you've released has got that sort of organic feel, i.e. it's a receipt or it's a credit card, or in the case of Footwear, it's a pair of socks. Everything seems to be, I don't call it organic, I call it incidental. It's just things you've got on you that you're able to do magic with. Is this something that you look for when you create, or is it just the way your mind works and you come up with stuff with everyday objects sort of thing?
I guess a bit of both, really. So the type of magic that interests me is the type of magic that I do release, so that when I'm releasing stuff and creating stuff, I'm always creating stuff for me to actually perform in a situation. And the idea for overdraft I had years and years before. The idea for transaction I've had years and years before, and they came out of being at gigs or in social situations, and being a frustrating situation where I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just do that. And then eventually, once COVID was over, I decided that was going to be something I wanted to put a lot more focus and effort into. And that was when I started to, create some prototypes and start getting in touch with magic dealers to get these ideas, out there and have some fun with them, and then start sharing them with the magic community.
Yeah, and they're great. I know overdraft. We sold a lot of overdraft. I mean, it's a great effect, and I can't remember who it was, but I've been with various magicians when I've seen them open their wallets, and you instantly see the overdraft card in there. I mean, there's no mistaking it if you know what it is, the color of it, and everything else. So it is one of those effects that magicians are truly using as their EDC. It is a carry everywhere, perform at any time style of effect, and it's great. And with footwear, it's the same sort of effect where you've got it on you. It's just part of you, and you can just go into it at any time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, footwear was born from my, sort of love of reveals, card reveals, and I always have loved having card reveals on me at gigs and in sort of everyday situations, because I believe that it's a really strong thing to do. If you're thinking like a magician, you might think, it's just revealing a card or revealing something, but actually to a lay person, it's really, really strong. And when I started creating footwear, I had that kind of reveal in mind, and then the pieces of the puzzle started to get put together, and then it became very quickly a card to impossible location as well. And then the whole project of footwear was born from that, just that idea of wanting to create my own card reveal, because I loved sock tricks, the ones that the popular ones that have been out on the market, but for whatever reason that they weren't right for me. So it was great to be able to create my version from the ground upwards that I wanted to create for myself, and then share with other people, and for them to enjoy as well.
Yeah, and the nice thing about footwear, you do mention obviously the other sock tricks. There was one, a great one called Socks by Mikhail Hout or Hout. And you've got Bill Abbott's got one as well. What was Bill's called?
Bill's was Socks Appeal.
Socks
and
Appeal,
so Bill's was more designed for a parlour or a cabaret.
And an opener.
Yeah, exactly sort of that. You physically got to, walk out on stage or in front with, you don't have to, but you've got to either get somebody to put the socks on your arms or walk out with them on your arms. And for me, it just wasn't right. I do a lot of cabaret and parlour, but for me, that just wasn't right. And then there was parts of the socks routine as well that just weren't right for me as well. So that was the mission. So I kind of worked backwards on this. I knew I wanted to do something with a sock. And I knew I wanted it to be the original version. There's two versions of footwear. We've got the formal and the funky. But the original version that I wanted to create for myself was the formal version, because I hadn't seen a black style sock before. And I knew I wanted that. And then I just worked backwards, and then eventually got to where the routine now is.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I was speaking to Mark Spellman, who's, obviously he's a very good close-up magician, even though he's known really now for mentalism. And he actually rang me this morning. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But I was speaking to him a few weeks ago, and he said, what's your next release? So I said to him, we're releasing footwear. So I explained what it was. And he made the point that as magicians, we all know how to get a card selected, how to get it put in the pack, how to control it, do whatever we need to do. The one thing that we're always looking for is a great, interesting reveal. And that's the thing, it's the reveal that makes the effect, not the selection procedure, not the control. It's the reveal. And we're always looking for fun, interesting reveals. And footwear, is just that. It's a really fun, interesting reveal of a playing card. But more than that, you've got that with your original routine, a card is selected, the image of that card appears on your sock, and then the card vanishes from the deck and appears in your sock, which is a beautifully structured, solid routine. Now, I know from having, Harry on BGT with the rest of the boys from 4MG, one of the biggest reactions they got in their audition was taking their jackets off at the end and having the playing cards on the back. And even if you watch, there was a few videos that went up where they're reaction videos where people were watching the 4MG performance and reacting to it. And when that bit was done, the layperson's perspective on the effect was, how did they get a card that was just chosen on the back of their shirt? Not one of them said, that's on the back of their shirt anyway. That card appeared on there. They could have chose any card. And that's the beauty that sometimes as magicians, we forget. A layperson's perspective on this is they could have picked any card and that card is on that sock.
And for me, the reason that worked is because it's how direct it is. It's easy for people to understand, and you might say, well, surely any magic trick is easy for the spectator to understand, but unfortunately that just isn't the case. There's a lot of procedure. A lot of the time, especially in a professional environment, you are interrupting people's day, or you're interrupting them while they're talking to their friends or colleagues they haven't met before. Their attention span might not necessarily be at an all-time high at that moment. Some people will, some people will be really ready for it. They can't wait to see the magician in the room. But you've got to make sure that you're performing magic that is quick, visual, is direct, and people can understand, because someone later on is probably going to ask them what the magician did as well, and they need to be able to describe it really easy. Yeah. So it's and I think sometimes magicians will get caught up on the fact that their some slight hand might have been removed from it, or it's too easy from a magician's point of view. But I think I said it before on the live launch that we did. If I could really do magic, I would do it in the least amount of moves possible. That's what I would. I wouldn't need any procedure. It would be, here's a card, goes into the pack, nothing happens, right? I don't need to do any cuts or anything like that. We're talking hypothetically. Obviously, most of the time you'll need to do stuff like that. But to the spectator, they do remember things like that. They will remember if you've they've seen a card and you've handed them the deck and then not touched them. I mean, how many times have you performed and someone said, we didn't touch the cards? Or you didn't come anywhere near it. People remember these little key details. So so when I'm creating magic, I always try and eliminate the parts that I don't think are needed. Some parts will always be needed, but I want it to be streamlined and direct for the audience.
Yeah, no, 100%. And even Vernon used to say that a trick has to be you should be able to explain the trick in one sentence. And that's what it is. And a lot of people, especially when they're getting into magic, usually when they're in that sort of middling section before they're out performing to lay people, they're still performing to family. You get into this situation where you will perform longer routines with a lot of process and this, that, and the other, which is great and it's entertaining and it's brilliant. But when you hit the real world, usually it's got to be quick, hard hitting, but very direct. You don't want them having to think about it, because when you're out performing, people could be drinking. If they're in a group, you know, you've got to grab their attention. You've got to hit them with the magic fast, because otherwise, you know, there's a chance that this person in the group's going to call this person, they're going to start talking, and things will get missed and everything else. So it's really down to, one, audience management, but two, making sure that your tricks are direct and extremely easy to follow. And I've been caught up in that trap before many years ago, where I practiced numerous effects that I thought, this is great, and I get there and do it, and the reactions are not what I was expecting, and purely because the effect was just a little bit too complicated for them.
Yeah,
You
of
know,
course.
it's,
Yeah,
you know,
it's yeah, it's a strange one. I mean, of course, there's no problem with having those more contrived, longer routines, and I still will have a couple of things like that, because if I'm at an event and there's, you know, maybe less guests than what we're expecting, or you've got a bit more time, it's really nice to do what I call a relaxed, casual performance. So they've already
yeah,
seen you do commercial stuff, and then you've got maybe half hour, 20 minutes of the gig left, and you go, do you know what? I'll go back to that group. They're sitting down. I'm just going to sit down with them and give them like almost like a mini sort of parlour performance just for three or
yeah,
four people, and they absolutely love it. And those sort of tricks are great for them. But I've got a bit of a strange analogy, and I always say it. I don't think I've ever spoken about it publicly, but when I was younger, I was a massive fan of like wrestling, WWE, and there was always
yeah,
two types of wrestlers. You had the amateur wrestlers and you had the professional wrestlers. So your amateur wrestlers were like your Olympic level, school level, that kind of thing, and your pros were like your WWE and that type of thing. And here's the thing: the amateurs were really technically sound and amazing. They did all these amazing things, all right, but they weren't doing it professionally. The
yeah,
professionals added all the glitz and glamour, and you know, wrestling, people get hurt, but it's a show. They put on a show, a bit more glitz, a bit more glamour to make it amazing for the audience. So they're presenting it in a bigger way.
yeah,
Those are the ones that people want to see in a professional capacity over and over again, because they're the ones that are providing entertainment. And it's the same with magicians. You know, you've got the amateur magicians and the semi-professionals, and then the pros. You'll find the material performed by amateurs and pros will be very different, because we're trying to appeal to a different sort of person, a different end of the market. And it can be a bit of a strange gap to feel when you sort of, like you say, when you go from performing to family and friends to then performing to people that don't necessarily want to see you perform. So you've
yeah,
got to win them over. You've got to win them over quick, and you've got to deliver some pretty cool, memorable stuff. And let's not forget as well, you sometimes get put on the spot, and you'll someone will introduce you to like a CEO of a company, or it could be even a celeb or someone, and you get things like nerves hit you, right? And you want to have the routines like Footwear that you know there's no sleight of hand and no process involved, so that you can just deliver a performance and get
yeah.
you in with that group. So it's really important, in my personal opinion, to make sure that you present your magic, and you don't get too caught up on technical stuff all the time.
Yeah. No, do you know what? I think you've really hit the nail on the head. I think there's, if I think back to when I was learning magic, I was learning effects that would fool me, that would be interesting to me, and the things that I thought, oh my God, they're amazing. And I've said this story hundreds of times before, where my first, it was, well, it was a professional gig, but it was my first sort of big public performance I did many years ago, and it was with another group of magicians, and we had an audience, and we would move around tables, and I did what I considered to be the hardest sleight of hand that I could do. So it was
Yeah.
all stuff that I had practiced for so long, and I was, you know, I would show the magicians at the club, and it was like, oh my God, that's great, and everything else.
Yeah.
So that was it, you know. I was going to do that, and I did it, and the reactions were fine. You know, they were great. But later on that evening in the bar, I performed Invisible Deck, Cigarette Through Card at the time, because we could smoke inside, Card Tune, and Sponge Balls, and the reactions were screams. The difference in reactions from the routines that were great and took a lot of work compared to the simple, says what it is on the tin, very easy to follow, was dramatic. And that was my moment of realization.
Yeah. And you know, it's a bit like I say, it's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, because when you start performing professionally as well, you realise, you know, obviously there's thousands and thousands of tricks, but you start to realise very soon that there's a group of tricks that work really well, that are tried and tested by professionals, and they work. And if you don't want to, as a professional magician, you never have to deviate from those 5 or 6 tricks, and you can make a good living from being a magician. And I did that for a long time, and then I got complacent and bored after doing 6 gigs a week for nearly 10 years. I mean, not every day, not every week, but you get the idea. And that was when I was like, let's strip down what these tricks actually do, what they are. And that was where I'd come up with like overdraft, because I looked at something like extreme burn. I was doing way too much, and I still do it, but I was doing it way too much. And I looked at what it was. It was simple, quick, visual, and it engaged with people because it was to do with money, all right, to do with something personal to them. So then I started to go, well, how can I make my professional magic a little bit more interesting? Not for anyone else, not for any other magicians, but for me, to make me actually want to go out and perform, and give the best every single time. And that was when I started to create a lot more magic. And actually it was after the COVID period that gave me that confidence to do that, because throughout COVID I did a lot of virtual shows, and when that first happened, there was no out the box virtual show. You could literally try and test anything, and you had to see what would work. So it gave me that kind of creative spark to come up with a show and some tricks and some routines. And then when COVID ended and I, was all of a sudden back out in the real world, I was almost a bit disappointed that I couldn't then create stuff. So I then started to, come up with ideas, and then start, picking up on ideas that I'd had previously. But yeah, I think it's important, especially as a professional magician, even if you're going to do those, those tricks, your bottle through tables, your omni decks, your ring flights, to do something different with them, to add something that makes it. It can be something slight, but don't perform it the same as everybody else. Okay. Yeah. In fairness, in reality, you see a client, they'll say, I saw that magician do a bottle trick. They won't really know what they've done that's different to what you're doing. They'll just see it as the bottle trick, but you will know. You'll know, and you'll feel better as a magician knowing that you've added something of yourself to that routine.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Well, I think we should play the trailer of Footwear, and then we'll have a little chat about it, and then we're going to play another version of Footwear as well. So let's play the trailer now, and then we'll come back.
Over there, which is pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. Hello, I'm Paul Fowler, and this is Footwear. I'm going to get you to say stop anywhere you'd like for me. Stop. Right here. I'll cut where you said to the top. I'm not going to take it out, just remember it. Can you remember it for me? You remember it? Don't forget it. And then I'm going to cut it into the middle, and I'll give you the cards to hold on to, and then just hold it towards your chest like this. Here's what I didn't tell you. Before I stopped you a short while ago, I made a prediction about a card that I thought you would choose. In fact, it was kind of a prediction. It was more of a conscious choice that I made when I woke up. You see, I actually own a novelty pair of socks, and I'm wearing them right now. Would be amazed if in a minute I lift up my trouser leg, and sewn into the design is your playing card.
That would be pretty amazing.
That would be amazing. That would be pretty cool,
yeah.
Right? You're not going to believe this.
No.
I'll try and do this as fair as I can. Keep me honest. Here we go. Look at this. Unbelievably, here it is. Your card, the back of it. You look quite disappointed by that, to be fair. Like it was actually going to be your card. Yeah, not bad, are they? But I'm messing around a little bit. There's more to the design. You see, right here, there's actually a big red arrow pointing to the other foot. For the first time, what was the card? Say it out loud. For the first time, what was the card? Can you remember?
Three. Black three.
The three of clubs.
Yeah.
What about this sock over here? One card sewn into the design. Here it is. One card only. The three of clubs.
No.
the 7 of hearts, the
Very
exact
nice.
card that you all chose. Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. What if I could make your card, the 7 of hearts, travel from you back to me without even touching the cards? Done. Flip the cards over. Just quickly fan through them and have a little look. Just have a little look. Just sort of fan them through in front of yourself. Just go as quick as you can. Check it out. Look at this. 3 of spades. Completely gone, right? Check it out. It has to go somewhere. You were holding on to those the whole time, which makes this impossible. Right over here, inside my sock. 1 card only. What did we say? The 7 of hearts. That'd be a miracle then, wouldn't it? The 7 of hearts. Inside the sock now is 1 card. 1 card only. I'm Paul Fowler, and this is Footwear.
Such a commercial routine. I mean, I was there with you on the filming. It was me, you and Jamie Dawes actually that went out to do the filming. And the reactions were just, well, what we would expect them to be. They were just great from everyone.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note as well. This was performed on the street. This wasn't performed in an environment where you're at a gig and people are relaxed and necessarily going to be receptive. These people weren't expecting me to walk up to them, and it was literally, "Hi, can I show you a trick? I'm a magician." Yeah. And it was like that was it. So there wasn't really much build up. It was kind of just in, and that's an extremely, that's why David Blaine's stuff has been so popular, right? Because it's a very difficult environment to perform cold in. I'm glad it got was getting good reactions, because it does normally.
And you are, like you said, when you're doing things like that, you are performing cold. It's not like a street entertainer that will get the crowd going for 5 minutes before you hit with a trick. You are literally just going up to random people and saying, "Can I show you a trick? And do you mind if we film you?"
Yeah, and we got a lot of people saying no, because literally some people didn't want to watch magic, and you've got all that, especially performing street magic. That's a psychological barrier you've got to get over. But you're interrupting people in their shopping day or whatever, or off to the post office, and they're thinking, why do I want to watch a magic trick? And then to get a reaction like that, I think it's cool.
Yeah, it really is. So that's the standard routine. That was the routine that you created, which was a card selected, lost in the deck. The deck is handed to your spectator. It's in their hands. The card, obviously, the back of a card appears on one sock, which is a gag, but it appears on the other sock, which is a really strong moment. You cannot sort of overshadow that. That is such a strong moment, having the card on the sock. People freak at that point. But now with empty hands, or your spectator, goes through the deck, the card they just looked at is no longer there. Remember, they've been in their hands. And it's actually in your other sock, the first sock you showed, which is a really strong effect. But now we're going to show a different routine. Now, this doesn't use, because when you buy footwear, you get 2 custom card gimmicks plus your chosen pair of socks, whether it be the formal or funky, or you can go for the combo, which gives you a pair of each. Now, when we put this video up on our socials, we had a few emails from people saying, do I need both pairs of socks to do this routine? I'm only using the formal pair here. So you could do this routine with either pair that you've purchased. But what I've done is I've got 2 selections. So there's 2 cards in play. So let's take a look at this, and then I'll tell you a bit about another bonus routine that you will also get when you purchase this. So let's take a look at the 2-person performance. Jenny, Emma, I'm going to show you a card trick. Before we do any card trick, you've got to give the cards a really good shuffle like this. And of course, after a shuffle, you've got to give the cards a cut. Jenny, as I go through the deck, say stop anywhere you like.
Stop.
right here. Do you want to go a few more, or are you happy there?
Happy there.
Sure. Okay, take that card. Emma, you take this card. You've both heard of sleight of hand.
Yes.
I'm going to show you what I call sleight of foot. Okay, very interesting concept. But have a look at your cards, make sure you remember them. And Jenny, your card's going to go about halfway down. Please make sure you remember your card.
Okay.
And Emma will put your card halfway down as well. Okay, so both cards
Yep.
in the pack. And in fact, we'll give the cards another shuffle. Happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Emma, just think of your card for me. Just imagine what it looks like. Get an image of your card. So I'm going to pluck that image out of your mind and I'm going to throw it just down here on my sock. What was the name of the card you were thinking of?
7 of hearts.
7 of hearts. Now, if this has worked, there should be a 7 of hearts on my sock. What's on there?
7 of
7
hearts.
of hearts. Jenny, take hold of those again. We're going to try the same with you. Just imagine what your card looks like.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to pluck the image out of your mind and I'm going to throw it at my sock. You don't even have to tell me what your card is.
Okay.
It's going to be on my sock. Would you be impressed?
I would be.
Watch. Oh, this sometimes happens. I threw it, but it's landed the wrong way up. But believe you me, that is your card. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
We'll try something even better for you.
Right.
You've been holding the deck,
Yeah.
right? I don't even know what your card is. Just in your mind. Watch. Just like this. The card has now vanished from the deck.
Right.
What was your card?
The 3 of spades.
Have a look through it. Is it there?
Not so far.
It's not there, right? Your card has vanished from the deck. Now look
Whoa.
carefully. Look carefully inside my sock. There is one card. Your card was
3
the...
of spades.
And that is the
Oh,
3 of spades. And you got to look at my lovely legs. So that's a 2-person performance. Now I will say that was the routine speeded up a little bit because it's for socials. You've got to keep it quite short and everything else. So usually I'd get the 2 cards selected separately, give it a bit more time rather than straight in and give them both a card. But you get the general idea. Now, the other bonus that I've included on there is a signed card to sock. Now, I had Spellman call me earlier after he saw this video and he said, "Oh, I love what you've done with it." And we were chatting and I said to him, "Oh, you should see my signed card version." And I explained it to him. And he said, "Oh my God," he said, "that's brilliant. You could do that at the end of any card effect you're doing, like the ambitious card or whatever, and their signed card is going to appear in your sock, but you could, you know, go straight, get another card selected, that will be the one printed, and then their card's going to appear." It's actually a really strong tool, and I must admit, it's in the recent weeks, it's become one of my favourite things to perform footwear. I love it because the moment, and you heard it on that video, the moment I lift my trouser leg up and they saw the card, you got a reaction.
Yeah. And presumably that wasn't just your leg, your naked leg they were reacting to either.
No, the last, that would be laughter.
That's like the pinnacle of the effects, that part, isn't it?
That's the comedy element, is my white legs.
Yeah, no, it's really, really good. And actually, when you told me about it, I was like, oh yeah, that works really, really well. Because I believe on the download, I do teach a 2-card version with one of each sock. But this is great, this version, because this is your version, I think, is better than that version that I teach on there. And the sign card version is really, really nice. Again, I don't believe you need to do it signed, but if you want to, you can, and it's good that it's versatile and that you can choose which way you want to go with it, because footwear, although we provide you with these routines and these ideas, and how it is when you buy it. It's a canvas, right? It's a blank canvas. You've got this pair of
100%.
socks, but you can create your own. And as I was saying earlier, I didn't realise the importance of being creative as a magician until I was probably about 5 or 6 or 7 years into being a full-timer and thinking, where do I go from now? How do I have my own stamp on magic, and how do I, add a little bit more of me into it? So, you should always buy a trick nowadays, and you should think to yourself, I love that, I'm going to perform it. And then when you've performed it over and over again, you can then start to change the wording. You can then start to have little details. Sometimes you'll perform to an audience and they'll actually feed you lines or jokes, and you'll go, I'll actually put that into the presentation. I know that happens with me quite a lot. I know that happens with a lot of other magicians, and some of the best lines and gags that you get in your routines come from the audience, and it just comes from performing over and over again the same routine, because when you do that, it then becomes a bit of putty that you can mould into it however you want.
Yeah. No, once again, really, really good points. And it's true. I think as a magician as well, we should always look at an effect. And the way I look at it is, I never really look at someone's performance of the effect. I look at the effect, and then I start thinking about, one, will that fit me? And two, how would I do it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You don't have to buy an effect and do it exactly as it says on the tin, because there are some great effects out there that are really magical, but they might be presented as a comedy routine, and you might go, oh, I'm not a comedy performer. That doesn't mean you can't do the effect without switching the presentation of it and making it more serious, And it's always good to be able to look at a routine, and your first question is, how do I make that work for me?
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you were saying earlier as well, where you stripped down 5 or 6 of the effects that you were doing, and you understood what about those effects was so powerful. But footwear, for me, in all honesty, is going to be part of my repertoire. If I'm going out and performing, and, the nice thing about having the formal socks is, believe it or not, I have performed a few times at places like funerals and stuff like that. People might hear that and say, oh, no, I couldn't. But as soon as people, if you're at a wake is time where people are talking, usually good, fun stories are going around. And if we were at a wake recently, actually, and it was part of Jenny's family that she didn't know too well, but obviously because of Facebook, you're all together now. And while I was out buying some drinks for everyone, someone asked Jenny if I was a magician, or is your husband a magician? And she said yes. Would he mind showing us some stuff? Now, it made me feel a bit awkward, but as soon as you've done the first one, you can see everyone was liking it, and everything else, it was fine. But once again, to me, the formal socks, if I would have had them then, I would have gone to the funeral in them, because no one knows what they are. They're just black socks until you need them.
I was at literally a corporate event yesterday. There's an afternoon thing it's like a boat that you go out on those corporate boats, and then you're actually on the Thames for about 4 hours. So I had like the same group of like 80 people, and I'd done finished up. The boat was docking back into the docking area of the in London, and I was packed up, ready to get off the boat, and my client said, thanks so much, already said goodbye. I said, oh, by the way, can you show us one more? And I was like, okay, I didn't want to say, I just packed away. So I'm thinking, I've got my phone on me, I've probably got a couple of apps on that I can do. I've got Overdraft, which I've already done a few times. I've got Transaction, I've done those. And I thought, oh yeah, I put on the socks this morning, didn't I? And then I just went into Footwear, and that was it. And I didn't need to worry about it. It was on me, and that's what we say. It's an everyday wear that you're always ready. And actually, I don't know. I'm sure this does happen to other magicians, where somebody will ask you to show them a trick on the spot, and they'll say, and they'll almost make a bit of a joke, as if, oh, are you not set up for it? Are you not ready to go? And if you've got something like footwear, you're kind of answering that question and having it and almost like kicking back because you know that you're set up without being set up, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
and you always need to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that I wear all the time as well.
Yeah, it's great. And the other thing I just want to throw out there as well is if you do my signed card version, you don't even have to. So if you're doing a gig, and I know this question's going to come up, oh, you're always revealing the same card on your sock. Now, I would happily do the signed card version as a standalone and only ever revealing one sock, the one with the back design on it.
Yeah.
You know, and have that as an impossible ending to an ambitious card or any sort of card routine where a card selected, even if the card, appeared in my wallet, put it back in the deck and then it appears in my sock or vice versa. That you could easily repeat, you could perform Footwear and then you could do the signed card version of Footwear to the same group straight after each other, and it will still get an amazing reaction.
You can, and I talk about it on the instructions as well. But you can perform Footwear, over and over again at a gig as well. And I know this because I've been playing around with one card revelation tricks for some time. I've got another card revelation trick coming out in the future elsewhere, and I know that from doing that and Footwear that because in the audience's mind, yes, that is going to be the same every time, right? Yeah. But it then becomes about influence and persuasion because if someone says, well, what happens if it's the same for them? You say, it has to be the same for them or otherwise this goes wrong. It's my job to persuade them and convince them to do that. So then it becomes very Derren Brown-esque and very much like a suggestion-based trick instead. And that messes with people's heads even more. So, you can go and perform this as many times as you want at a gig. I mean, I probably wouldn't perform it, and I don't perform it to every single group, but if I'm at a wedding or a corporate event and there's 100 people, you do this, 6-7 times, and no one will even question it. There's no worries, and so you can perform it over and over again. No worries at all.
Yeah. Well, if I was doing a walk around gig, 100%, I would do this to every group. I would do the 2-person handling to every group, and that's most probably the only trick you would have to do. Maybe one more, but you've got a lot of magic there in that 2-person, and I could pad that out to 3.5 minutes of presentation. There's enough magic going on. The first card just appears on your sock. The second card, you've got the comedy gag, and then it vanishes from the deck that they're holding and appears. And remember that with the 2-person version you just saw there, I'm not using the card gimmicks. That is a clean deck. So that's that's really nice.
And of course, if you wanted to do it, and this is just thinking off the top of my head, if you wanted to do it group to group as well, and you're having 2 cards selected, one of those selections could be random every time.
Yeah.
All right. So you could have that card, one card freely chosen, and one could be forced, and then you can just bubble peek or peek the card that's being controlled, and then you can then reveal the first card like a mind reading type reveal, and then go into the reveal of the second card, which is printed on your sock. So that there's loads of different ways of doing this, and as I said, it's a utility really. It's a blank canvas for you to play with and come up with your own ideas.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And we will obviously see you again soon with your next Alexander release, which hopefully won't be too long away. So, ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking the fantastic Mr. Paul Fowler. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thanks a lot.
So, guys, that's it for this week's deep dive. I really urge you to check out Footwear. The reactions you'll get from it will surpass anything you think you'll get. Honestly and truthfully, you perform it to lay people, the reactions you get will be incredible. I am truly enjoying performing this, and it will be part of my repertoire from now on. And that's not sales talk, that is the truth. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back next week with another deep dive for you. But until then, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. You'll be notified every single time we go live on our YouTube channel. And don't forget, we have the Tuesday live, which happens at 2 p.m. every Tuesday on both Facebook and YouTube. So it just leaves me to say, have yourselves a great week, and we will see you next week right here on the Deep Dive. See you then.